Um, who the hell are we and what century is this? Basically, are questions that we're all facing. Um, Thomas Paine is sorely missed, but we abandoned the age of reason, and it's lacking in common sense and we live in times that truly try men's souls. Now, folks, what the fuck century is this? This is what This is what the current President Biden had asked the press poll on Tuesday afternoon. Now, President Biden's detractors will no doubt seize upon the question as further proof of President Biden's mental decline, but the facts and the context once again won't support it. Biden was talking about the anachronistic stance of today's Republican Party, a synthesis of evangelicals, crackpots, conspiracy theorists, authoritarians, misogynists, sadists, racists, masochists, flat earthers, and science deniers whose greatest shared characteristics are fear and ignorance, and they also got a whole bunch of pedophiles in their party too. So, now the question is, and this is the question that Biden had posed to the press poll. It was a retort after being asked about contraception, and it comes on the heels of regressive actions by the Supreme Court toward women and reproductive health care in particular. Now, while certain members of Congress try to throw the nation into a tailspin in order to embrace a time that never existed, in other words, Biden asked a damn good question. If you're Donald Trump, you might imagine that it's the 16th century and that you are Henry VIII. He certainly yearns for the divine rights of kings and has declared as much. He's counting on the majority of the Supreme Court, and 3 members of which he considers his vassals, to delay any accountability in court for his actions. Now, if you're Amanda Jones, who's a middle school librarian in Louisiana, you might fear that it's the late 17th century after Republicans came after her for opposing book banning. The Salem witch trials look all too familiar to folks in Louisiana and in a bunch of other red states. If the right books are banned, however, then you won't be able to read about it. Many Trump sycophants apparently think that they're somewhere toward the end of the 18th century, and that they're patriots trying to ward off the British Empire. Now they have parted company with facts and reason, however, and they are more like the mistaken group of villagers who opposed the rule of law after the Boston Massacre. When John Adams defended British soldiers in the face of popular outrage. Then there are the rest of the politicians and police officers who cannot stand people of color, and they miss the good old days of the KKK, which a lot of Trump supporters side with the KKK. They think it's the middle of the 19th century, and the violent retribution against anyone of a different color is just keeping their peace. Now, finally, there are the more enlightened activists. There are the more enlightened activists who favored the first half of the 20th century, when Jim Crow laws were enforced, women were subservient to all men, and at least if they were white men, voting rights were restricted to land-owning white heterosexual males, and marijuana, along with liquor in some places, was the stuff of the devil. Now none of these people, it seems, actually lives in the current century where the vast majority of us dwell, nor do they understand the political terms that they use to describe themselves in their simplistic universe. Now, Representative Jamie Raskin, who's a Maryland Democrat and a constitutional lawyer, said that he was recently asked if he was a Democrat or a liberal. He answered yes because he values liberty. He's a Democrat, he said, but because he values democracy. He calls himself a progressive because he values progress. But he also calls himself a somewhat conservative, Raskin explained on the podcast, and the podcast was called Just Ask the Question. That was because he said, I want to conserve a woman's right to choose, and the U.S. Constitution, our natural resources, our climate, our health, and many other things that we cherish in this country that the Republicans wish to destroy. Now, Michael Cohen would agree with that sentiment. Cohen, who was Donald Trump's former fixer and author of a new book, Revenge, and how Donald Trump weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice against his critics, said that he believes the Republican minions are happy to follow Trump wherever and whenever he may take them. Logic and common sense be fucking damned. Democracy is under siege from Moscow to Mar-a-Lago, he explained, but Raskin said that we had reached an inflection point, and our decisions in the midterm elections will determine whether reason can govern America in this century. It sure feels like that the age of reason is behind us, but Thomas Paine proclaimed, independence is my happiness, the world is my country, and my religion is to do good. Now, none of that would fly today. Government, even in its best state, is all but a necessary evil. In its worst state, an intolerable one, he said. That at least seems to have some relevance in today's world. Now, it follows that President Joe Biden's question wasn't merely rhetorical or sarcastic, but one that must be legitimately asked. and answered if we are to follow those who dwell in reality rather than those who pine for things that do not exist and never did. Now, furthermore, we must use the knowledge obtained by asking such questions to build a sustainable future of liberty that can serve as an example to the rest of the world. Now, we live in a world now. Right now, we're living in a world of struggle. While Paine's maxim that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph, has never been more true. It is also true that the struggle appears more difficult than ever. But in Russia, Vladimir Putin wants to go back to the mid-20th century and reinvent the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War. OPEC wants a more recent time, the last quarter of the 20th century, as it slashes oil production and jacks up their prices. Now, China wants to return to any point in its long imperial history when it ruled over Taiwan. In our own country, up is down and down is up. We have erased 50 years of progress for women, and now we're targeting civil rights. Decades of progress that followed the Stonewall riots are being eroded, and the right wing of politicians and activists target the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community. Books are being banned in America in 2022. Instead of history, some school districts are choosing propaganda over history. And then there's North Korea, whose leadership has never advanced beyond the middle of the 20th century, and desperately wants the world to pay fucking attention to that. And yes, a lot of this sounds like the 1950s. Hopefully, poodle skirts and greasers won't make a comeback. But pop music has gotten so bad, in my humble opinion, that if you actually think about music, Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Ray Charles would be a vast improvement. When I was asked about Donald Trump 6 weeks before the 2020 election, whether he accepted peaceful transfer of power, whether it was win, lose, or draw, he made clear that he would not accept a peaceful transfer of power. And Biden asked at that time, what fucking country is this? So it is that Joe Biden, a couple of years apart, has asked the two most relevant questions facing us today. What country is this, and what fucking century is this? If we are to be in the United States claiming to lead the rest of the world toward liberty and justice in the 21st century, we have to change course dramatically. Now, you may disagree with me and what I said, but I will defend to my death the right to say it, and it sounds completely old-fashioned in today's world, but it's a necessary sentiment because if I do not accept what others may think differently than me, then I've enslaved myself to my own opinion and have taken away the potential that I might change other people's mind. The Marjorie Trader Greens, the escorts Lauren Boebert and other ignorant, self-flagellating clowns on the right want to beat you into submission with their ignorance, and it's an outrageous thing if anyone thinks differently than they do. Sometimes the far Democratic side is no better, wishing to silence anyone on the right who thinks differently than what they do. Payne noted that if you're afraid to offend someone, you cannot be honest. I honestly don't give a shit who I offend at this point, but both extremes are convinced of their righteousness, and both are anything but that. Now, fear and loathing, as Hunter Thompson once reminded us, is a powerful motivator for both sides. The right wants you to fear socialism and the Democrats want you to fear the Republicans. At the end of the fucking day, we're still dealing with electing a bunch of politicians this fall who are flawed human beings like the rest of us, and we all know where they're going to lead us to. H.L. Mencken said it best: if experience teaches us anything at all, it teaches us this. It's basically a good politician under democracy is quite as unthinkable as an honest burglar. His very existence, indeed, is a standing subversion of the public good in every rational sense. He is not one who serves the common weal. He is simply one who preys upon the commonwealth. It is the interest of all the rest of us to hold his powers to an irreducible minimum and to reduce his compensation to nothing. Now, many politicians today have rigged the system so they are accountable to nobody, and as Payne said, they should be trusted by no one. What we the people have become, we the entitled, we the white, we the oppressed, or we the exploited, and we have allowed our political leaders to hoodwink us so badly that many of us have forgotten that we have far more in common with each other than with most of the people who we have elected and supposedly to represent us. Now, no one outside politics could get away with avoiding subpoenas, taking bribes from lobbyists, ignoring our work, and exploiting workers, lying on every conceivable occasion, and refusing to take consequences for their actions, and not only profiting from obvious corruption, but being revered in some circles for doing so. It isn't the behavior that we claim to value or want to teach our children. Greed, disharmony, fear, anger, hatred, and lack of empathy are universally reviled by every rational person and every social construct known to man. But those things are overwhelming us today, and we find ourselves right on the edge of a cliff, and if we go over it, we may never recover from it. Now, Michael Cohen saw the handwriting on the wall after being thrown under the bus by Donald Trump. He has dedicated himself to trying to right the wrongs he admittedly helped to create. and Jimmy Raskin is among the few politicians with his head screwed on straight, trying to steer the ship of state into a safe harbor. And Joe Biden is asking the most important question that we are facing. Even if his staff is muddling the message, Republicans only want power to force their minority views upon the majority, and millions of Americans have become very angry and confused. Like I said, what country is this? What century is this? Thomas Paine saw the blessings of liberty and saw an emerging nation called the United States as an asylum for mankind. We cannot return to his age, but we can use the sentiments upon which the country was founded on, and the knowledge of our past to better understand our lives today. November's election will let us know if that's possible. Today we live in a time that tries men's souls, but we remain stuck in this political quagmire precisely because we haven't learned the lessons of history. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just as little as a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.